Hey everyone, today, welcome. No, it's okay. It's okay. Just come in. Today we are going to talk about balance. We're going to touch on emphasis a little bit. This might be a bit of a review for some of you guys since since your last project asked you to balance a couple of things. But that's a good thing. It's okay. It's good. So hopefully this won't be too much new information for you guys, especially I'm sure that you know balance is pretty self-explanatory, but let's talk about it visually. So, as always, please open your sketchbook and take some notes on a fresh and clean piece of paper. hmm 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 Okay, the definition of balance. This refers to the distribution of visual weight or visual force within a composition. If something is off balance, you'll either be able to tell right away visually, or you'll kind of feel uncomfortable. You'll be subconsciously opposed to something about the design. So sometimes it's more subtle, but you most likely could be able to tell right away if something is off balance or if it is in balance. However, you'll see that sometimes the asymmetrical composition can work in favor for the solution. If you're a graphic designer, for example, you'll know that this means that the center justified things, the things that are lined up in the center, that is not always the best choice. But I won't go on the high horse for that. So let's think for a second about how we actually interpret visual weight. First, and maybe the most obvious, is gravity. We evaluate images through the lens of our understanding of gravity, or how things sink or float relative to the Earth and to us. Secondly, we interpret visual weight through the identification of hierarchy, and that means just the level of importance or emphasis. We'll talk about that more in a bit, but we always evaluate visual objects on like a scale of most important to least important. That's just a human thing. We always do that. It's kind of involuntary. If you have six apples on the table, your brain is going to automatically put them in order from best looking to worst looking. It's not a bad thing. Just that's just what we do. Remember this diagram when we talk our friends A, B, C, and D. This is the diagram that we used when we talked about positive and negative space in a couple lectures back. I want you to remember that the placement of objects or figures, as you see here, in a composition helps viewers detect the stability or the dynamic qualities of that composition. So remember that placing objects in the center of a layout, like in A, it can imply assuredness, it can imply power and clarity. And then, of course, objects flying off the page, like in C and D, imply motion, dynamism, the passing of time. Remember these? We're going to take it a step further. And looky here, we've made a human friend. Should we name them? Okay, what do y'all want to name them? Wait, who said Tupac? No. Okay. We'll do Ice Cube. I heard Ice Cube. That's a good one. Okay. Ice Cube it is. No Tupac, Ice Cube. Okay, here's Ice Cube holding the cube. Oh, I see what you did there. Okay. Ice Cube holds the cubes. Okay, extra credit for you. Let me write that down real quick. Good job. Yes, okay, well, so Ice Cube is holding these four cubes from the previous diagram, from A, B, C, and D, from the last slide. So does adding the human element to the design affect or change the visual impact of these rectangles? I mean, yeah, I would say so. Okay, well, let's talk about it visually. So rectangles A and B, would you say that these are still stable like they were in the first? Why? Yes. Yes, okay. The edges of the rectangles in A and B are still horizontal and vertical, and they are generally centered in the composition, but they're also weighted toward the bottom. They have visual weight because Ice Cube is holding them. So like we detect that it has visual weight because they have to be held. They're not floating. Rectangle C, though, is definitely not horizontal and vertical. They're diagonal edges. And plus, the cube is not centered with Ice Cube. So what does that make you think about? How are they different? How is the rectangle different from the one in A and B? Yeah, it's lightweight, exactly. So Ice Cube is able to lift the rectangle pretty easily. Yeah, good job. So it has a different visual weight. Same thing with D. This one has a more three-dimensional quality to it. It's no longer a rectangle. It's literally a cube holding a cube, right? And now it has motion and it has a dynamic taking up of space. It's not like a piece of paper, it's an actual cube. Starting to make sense, guys? That was too much fun. Ice Cube, that was so good. Yeah, I'm gonna give you extra credit points. Yes. Hey, I'm recording. Okay, I'm recording. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it during break, okay? Okay, sorry, online friends. Okay, balance. Okay, guys, let's settle down. Okay, so balance. Remember, we're back on track now. Balance cannot be achieved in a vacuum, though. What I mean is you can't see balance without the context of other visual things or other visual or sorry, or other understanding of the context. You have to have a knowledge of gravity or some kind of other object to compare this object in question to in order to see if it's balanced. It's kind of abstract, but just trust me. So we're gonna, like in the other exercises that we've done, we have to add a vessel to start with to make something be in balance or out of balance. So designers often know that they want to make an album cover or like a smartphone graphic, so they'll always start within a common, understandable boundary. That's what I mean. The canvas or the artboard is the context or the setting in which we're going to try and achieve some type of balance, whatever that may be. So here, these two examples on the screen are examples of atypical formats. So these are not like smartphone graphics or anything, but they're still recognizable. On the left is a photograph by Berenice Abbott, and they emphasize the verticality of Wall Street in this photograph. And well, yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about the composition. Just what do you see generally? I know it's kind of hard, guys, to see. Okay, yeah. So you're looking in between buildings. You're actually above eye level. So I'm pretty sure this photograph is taken like on like I don't know, the 15th floor of a building or something. This is not eye level. This is not ground level photograph. Yeah. So the space between the buildings kind of cuts through the center of the photograph. And what is the most obvious about this photo, other than it's black and white? Yeah, it's really narrow. It's narrow. It's a very skinny photograph. And what that does is emphasizes the height of the buildings, the centeredness of the composition, and the verticality, all those vertical lines, the tallness of the actual photo. Yes. So would you consider that balanced? I mean, yeah, I would. Yeah, I would consider it balanced just because of our understanding of how buildings in the city works. That we are enclosed on either side by buildings. I guess you could say it's off balance a little bit by the fact that everything is weighted toward the ground. But there's also, so if you kind of blur your eyes a little bit, that's why the picture is so small, but if you blur your eyes a little bit, you can notice that the top sliver of light where the sky shows between so this the negative space between the buildings, that's very bright and very prominent, but it's balanced out by the contrast of the darkness from the bottom. we'll talk about more things being in balance um, differently. I have a couple diagrams to show you. Okay, so on the right of the screen, this is a painting by Catherine Freund, and it offers the viewer a different kind of visual balance. So think about think about this way as you look at this painting. As Westerners, Western Americans, Westernized people, we read generally from the top left to the bottom right. So your eye starts in the top left corner of this particular painting in that bright, shining corner. And we follow that dark brown area and the edges of all those little journal pages. We follow that edge all the way to the bottom right. And then along the way, as we kind of follow that brown edge, we look a little bit into the golden shining area on the bottom left, and our eyes will detect the subtle differences in texture, and so our eye will want to go and explore those subtle areas. Especially when you see this painting in person or in a larger format, there's lots of detectable things in that golden area, like the layering of paint, or sorry, the layering of tape that's been painted over. There's a plumb tool, which is that little brown thing that you see in the center, and that's a physical tool, and it's hanging from the top of the canvas. So the point is, this is not as intensely balanced as the photograph by Abbott, but both of the compositions would be considered layouts that offer their own successes in visual weight, and they are in balance in their own ways. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by visual weight and balance before we get into the diagrams. This one's a fun one. Does anyone know this photographer? No? Okay. Super famous, you guys. If y'all are ever looking for a gift for like a housewarming gift or a gift for your parents or something, get them a coffee table book with the photos by Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams. He's a very famous photographer and mostly does black and white photos, like this one. But he's a well-known photographer. His photographs are beautiful. A lot of them are nature. So it would be a great like a unique gift to get somebody, especially a housewarming gift. hmm Okay, so as we always practice, let's evaluate this photograph from the outside in. So firstly, what is the shape of this composition? Yes, square or kind of, we'll just say horizontal because it's a little bit longer than it is, or wider than it is tall. It's not a perfect square quite. What is perhaps the dominating element of art in this particular photograph? Close, not color, but really close to that. Value, yes, yes. Okay, value. Value, remember, those are the scale of darkness and lightness. So since technically there's no color in this photograph, it's black and white, we'll say that it's value. To take that further, you can say that a powerful principle in the photograph is contrast. I would say that that's probably the most prominent. Yeah. Line would be good too, because the horizon line is the thing that divides the whole photograph. Good. hmm That horizon is super prominent because the sky is so dark. If the sky weren't so velvety black like this, then maybe a different um, maybe pattern or something would be the more prominent element of art. Okay, here, yeah. Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, just keep the door cracked and come right back. Okay. Okay, guys, what is the other obvious visual element? Not element of art, but what's the obvious visual thing in this photograph? Yeah, no, yeah, that's not my computer mouse. That's the moon in the picture. Yeah, okay, so there's a very clear break in our concentration by that moon. The moon is just to the left of center. It's right in the blackness of the sky. So does the moon being there, do you think it's off balance? Couple of yeses, couple of no's. Well, it's both. It's kind of a trick question. It is off balance because the moon is not center of the photograph, but it's not necessarily uncomfortable. We still get this sense of peace and tranquility in this image probably because of the horizontality of the village and the vastness of the sky. Yes. The contrast, though, of that moon makes the focal point the moon. If the moon were not there, it would just be like a horizontal image. There would be nothing really to pull our eye up into the blackness of that sky. But the moon does that. The moon takes our eye away from the village at the bottom and up into that black sky. And once we're there, once our eye is there, we kind of like search around for stars and other things, other signs of life, UFOs, you know? hmm So, yeah, I mean, the image technically, like textbook, is off balance. Mathematically, those things are not centered. But this was a design choice by the artist, by the photographer, and it is successfully off balance because it successfully pulls the viewer's eye up to the sky, allows us to look around a little bit, and it also does evoke that sense of tranquility and peace and balance, for lack of better terms right now, that our eyes and our human brain desire. You guys are getting really good at this. Good job.
This effect, this is a different, obviously, painting. This effect is called approximate symmetry. Write that down. It's a real thing. Just give you guys a little bit a second to look at this. Try and detect the symmetry. Okay, well, while you're looking, approximate symmetry is something in the design that is just off center. I mean, it's just like how it sounds. It's almost symmetrical. But the effect is that it distorts the viewer a little bit, makes you a little bit uncomfortable, disorients you a little bit, and this is an example. So this particular painting is not as peaceful as Ansel Adams's photograph that we saw previously, even though things in that composition were slightly off-center and not quite symmetrical. This one is the same, but it has an opposing effect. This is a painting by Richard Estes, and I wonder how many of you are going, okay, well, why would you paint something so mundane like this, right? Like, this is so regular. And if you came to a gallery, then maybe you would spend 30 seconds with this painting and move on, right? It's pretty basic, but it's also striking. You'd be right. It's striking, though, but you have to look inside. I believe the artist's intention here is to pull the viewer in, reel them in to see to try and find like a satisfying symmetrical axial beauty network of the diagonal lines in the city. But as you guys have just practiced, when you look more closely, you can see that nothing really meets in the middle. There's nothing that satisfying in the middle, right? At least for me, anyway. The reflection of the glass, which is on the left side of the painting, cuts the composition off just off of the center. And it also distorts guiding lines, those diagonals that are supposed to meet right in the middle. You can really see that in the shadows on the bottom half, the shadows of like the crossing signs. They don't quite meet anywhere that is in the center, or they don't meet anywhere that gives you the satisfaction or equilibrium, right? So as viewers, as we look at this, we're kind of pulled into the center of the painting, but perhaps we pull back ourselves by the subtle imbalance, the subtle asymmetry here. So asymmetry can be beautiful, and it also can be a little disorienting, but still still beautiful, but a little bit disorienting. The other end of the scale, no pun intended. Get it? No. Scale balance. Okay, anyway, on the other end of the scale, symmetrically balanced designs, as you guys probably understand, appeal to our desire for equilibrium and our desire for visual stability. So here's an example. Maybe you guys are familiar with this already. This is the Taj Mahal. The building design is symmetrical itself, but I also wanted to include the picture of the reflecting pool on the bottom, which is in front of the building. And this reflecting pool offers us a powerful sense of equilibrium and symmetry, because it also gives us a reflection of the building itself. And so the axis is the horizon line. It gives us another axis of symmetry. So it's symmetrical and equal, I guess congruent if we want to use math words. Please don't correct me. Anyway, it's symmetrical down the center, as you can see, but it's also symmetrical at the horizon line too, for the most part. See that? Okay. The reason I wanted to show you guys the Taj Mahal with the reflecting pool is so that I could lead into this, the next level of symmetry, which is called radial symmetry. You probably can think of something that's radially symmetrical. Tires and rims are most often radially symmetric. There's lots of axes in which the design is mirrored. So wheels, a good one. Mandalas, a good one. Let me think. Any others? Watch, yeah, clocks and watches. The lids on what do you call it? Bath and Body Works candle jars sometimes. Yeah, if you're an artist or a designer, you see weird stuff in the world. Snowflakes, yeah, these are radially symmetrical things, which are often associated with nature, as you can imagine. Anyway, so they have multiple axes of mirroring, and usually the central point is the main focus. So if you think about a rim or a tire, like a wheel on a car, most of the time, if there is one there, the logo, the car logo or the wheel symbol, whatever, is in the middle of the hubcap, right? BMW, right in the middle of the hubcap. Chevy, right in the middle of the hubcap, etc. So I wanted to show you these also, because this is kind of like it is a modern work of art. This is by, these little wooden tiles are by Zach Weinberg, and they are laser cut pieces of wood and MDF, and he's assembled them and glued them together. But he's given us lots of examples of radially symmetric designs, and they're quite beautiful. All these compositions are variations on symmetry in the radial sense. So as you can see, they kind of pull you into the center. They give you that sense of, they give you the sense of stability because they're pretty grounded and symmetrical. So the one that stands out to me is in the third row on the far left with the pentagon. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's quite in the center, so my eye gets pulled there. So this is exactly what I'm saying about, remember Gestalt principles that we talked about? And this is why I always ask you to evaluate from the outside in, because as a whole, these are all presented to us and we see that they are nice and symmetrical and center weighted. We see that. But then once you detect something else, like right away, once you detect something else, it kind of throws the whole group off balance. If the pentagon one, the third row one, if that one was shown all by itself, we might get, a different sense of equilibrium or satisfaction visually. But since it's included in all of these others, then it's like, this is the one that's different. This is what our human eye and our brain does. It evaluates all of them as a whole, or in a whole. Okay, sorry, I digress. We looked at some examples of asymmetrical designs, but I wanted to give you guys something like not a formula, but a thing to remember, like a provable thing that you can remember. So go ahead and copy these diagrams in your sketchbook. Remember, they don't have to be perfect or anything, but I do want you to color in the solid forms, like the squares. And then for that bottom right square, just do like some hatching or cross hatching or stippling. Don't color it in all the way. Just make sure it's like a gray value, okay? This diagram can be titled Balance and Asymmetry. ASYMM, two M's, ASYMM, ETRICAL, asymmetrical. Okay, and the reason I want to talk about this is because we've seen that things off balance can make us feel uncomfortable, but I want to come back to the Ansel Adams photograph of the village with the moon. Sometimes asymmetrical designs can still be balanced, and they can offer us that equilibrium that we desire. So here are some methods that you could use to balance something that is asymmetrical in design. So yeah, these are strategies. So do you guys remember the balance unit in like high school science, IPC, physics maybe? I remember this. It was easy for me, maybe because I like geometry or something, but I'm not sure. I get this. This comes to me. So if you have science friends, or if you know a sixth grader, maybe they can help you with this if you don't get it. But yeah, email me if you need help. Okay, let's see. It's back to haunt you now, in other words. It is back to haunt you now. Okay, so in A, B, C, and D that you see on the screen, there are different objects on scales, and these are all balanced. You can tell by the little seesaw thing that they're sitting on. None of them are tilting to the left or the right. They're all balanced. In A, which is the top left, the tiny square is on the very edge of the scale, and the big square is near the fulcrum, which is that triangle that holds it in balance. Yes, this is how small shapes and large shapes can be balanced in a design. Stay with me. It will make more sense in a minute. Because maybe you're like, well, how does this connect to art though? Like, what about a canvas? We'll talk about it. We will. Okay. B, top right, is similar, but instead of a tiny square, you have multiple little squares, and that having multiple little objects balance out a big object is something that balances a design as well. So these little objects can be different forms. It can imply texture. It can imply contrast. You can already see there's some contrast that draws our eye to the stacked cubes. Yep, all of that can balance a larger object. And what I mean is it just pulls your eye away from the larger or more prominent object. It guides your eye away from it too. So it's not like your focus goes only on the big square. It goes to something else in the composition. That helps with balance. So, okay, why is C balanced? Oh, well, that's a good point, because the circle threatens to roll off the scale at any moment, yeah. What else? How is C balanced? How else is this? Well, I was thinking that the circle is kind of empty compared to the more solid cube, the dense cube. So if it were like physical, if this were a hula hoop, then you might put like a Lego brick on one side, or a big Lego brick, I guess, a building block on one side of the scale, and maybe the empty hula hoop on the other, and they would kind of balance each other out. So visual weight here in C on the bottom left is affected by the emptiness or the lightweightness because of the emptiness of that circle. And so then D is kind of a variation on all of these. It is balanced because the textured square, they're both the same size square, see? But the white square on the right seems a little bit lighter because it appears empty, and the textured square seems a little more dense, like it has cereal inside of it or something. I don't know, I'm thinking of light stuff. But if the textured square were all the way to the edge of that scale, it would tip it and they would both fall off. So that's why you have to move it toward the center to make it stay still like that. Does that make sense? Okay, so just stay with me. I know this is like very sciencey and diagrammatic. Stay with me. Take notes in your sketchbook. I'll give you guys a second to copy these. Okay, let's add a design board or a canvas or an art board to the mix, because remember, balance and symmetry cannot be completed in a vacuum. And remember, what that means is you have to have context in order to know that a thing is balanced or off balance, just like creativity. If you are a hermit and you stay inside your house, no one will ever know, and you included will never know if your ideas are good or innovative, because no one can tell you that they are. You have nothing to compare it to. So it's just you in your own world. You have to have context and opinions and outside influences and things to make your idea creative. Does that make sense? That's what in a vacuum means. Okay, so in these examples, in our friends A, B, C, and D, oh, I miss Ice Cube. Anyway, in these examples, the fulcrum is still present, that little triangle thing that holds everything in balance, but now it acts as the bounding box, the canvas, the artboard. So just try and imagine it at the center of each of these designs, and we'll see if they are balanced. So A and B, they're subtle. The differences here are subtle, but notice that in A, the rectangle at the top is touching the edges, and the square at the bottom of B is also touching the edge. So what does that do for your eye, you think? Right, it pulls your eye in A, it pulls your eye up to the top right, and then on B, it kind of makes the square seem super weighty and holds the entire composition down, so it pulls your eye down. And so if you add a floating square in A, it's so different that it kind of, okay, sorry, I had to pause for a second. Where was I? A. Okay, so adding a small square in the bottom, remember our scale, adding that small square at the bottom kind of pulls your eye downward, right? So it prevents that top rectangle from like flying off the canvas by pulling it back down a little bit. Yes, and then the same thing with B. And to make the square at the bottom kind of like not fall off the page, the big rectangle balances it out by pulling your eye upward, but not too far upward, because if that one in B, if that rectangle were touching the edge of the artboard, your brain would perceive it as stretching the canvas up as well. So these are very subtle differences, as we talked about. They're not centered, they're like just off center sometimes. They're very subtle differences, but it is those subtle millimeter differences that can change a design or sway it in one direction or the other. One time I was designing some logo or something at my other job, and one of my employees was sitting next to me, and they were like, "Why are you so obsessive over the tiny details?" Because, if you work in Illustrator, you zoom in so far to try and fix those points and make them smooth and simple. She was so confused. She was like, "Why are you doing it? It looks fine." I'm like, "No, no, baby girl, it does not. Trust me." And this is exactly why. You got to make a visually pleasing thing, because not everybody evaluates designs like we do as creatives, and not everyone detects what is wrong with them. If you see it, so regular lay people, if they are out in the world and they see a design that is just off, they don't look at it. They swipe past it. They look away. So your goal is to keep your audience's attention, right? So you'll have to use these strategies and use those millimeter changes to influence your design. That's why you can tell a little bit, like if your shirt is printed crooked or something, it's not right. You know what I'm saying? It's not right. If you have a bumper sticker on your car and it's crooked, you need help. I'm kidding. It's okay. I know those are difficult. Okay, back on topic. I'm sorry. All right. We talked about A, we talked about B. Okay, let's look at C and D. These are a little bit more complex, but I'm glad we've seen these before. All right. So in C, the rectangle is leaving us. Okay, bye. It's leaving us. And then so those three little squares at the bottom, then what do? Exactly. They make the canvas a little bit more stable. So our human brain understands that these are stacked, and we have this, general knowledge of gravity, so it kind of appears like building blocks. They're not floating in water. We always perceive them as like stacked on top of each other. So by stacking things, it gives a little bit more visual weight to the bottom of that canvas, pulls the floaty, leaving us rectangle back in a little bit, and keeps our eye circulating within that canvas instead of leaving with the rectangle. That's a trick. If you're a fine artist, if you're a painter or drawer if you draw, or if you're a painter or something, and you have work in a gallery or hanging in a home, you can make things go off the edges of the canvas. But in a gallery, if that happens, because there are other paintings to look at in the gallery, usually what that means is that viewers will be led to the next painting or drawing or whatever, work of art. They'll be led to the next painting because your lines are leading them off the canvas, away from yours. So there are subtle ways to add the leaving of things off of the canvas without being so prominent like this, if you're an artist who has paintings in galleries. If you have questions about that, ask me. I got you. I'll show you some good examples. Okay, let's move on to D. Sorry, I know it's going a little longer than normal. D. Okay, so in D, we've changed shapes. We don't have a stack of squares. Now we have a triangle. So what does that say? I always get different responses on this one. Yeah? The rectangle doesn't look like it's floating anymore. That's true. It's more set in place. Yeah, like A, because it's on the edge. Does anyone want to offer an explanation about that triangle, though? I was thinking that the difference in shape, so, I mean, we're looking at D relative to the three others on this slide, but the difference in shape gives it a little bit more weight because it also draws our eye down. And this makes sense because our human eye looks for variety, and the triangle is different than both the canvas, which is a rectangle, and the black rectangle. So because it's different, we're gonna look down to it. Plus, if the triangle were upside down and the point were pointing down, I honestly think that would give it even more visual weight because it's like, you know, it's literally pointing down. But this triangle in particular is more static. It's weighted toward the bottom. Good job, guys. Like I said, y'all are getting really good. I'm going to try and fly through these last examples. This is one of my favorites by Piet Mondrian. I'm sure you've seen these printed on sketchbooks and t-shirts and things. Piet Mondrian was a very influential artist in the De Stijl. Okay, sorry, I said we were going to go quick and now I'm nerding out. Anyway, so we have big and little squares like we're used to seeing, and white space and some black lines. Everything is horizontal and vertical, and there is very little implication of the diagonal line here. It is balanced. I'm giving you the answer. Why? Why is this balanced? Yeah, well, sure. The blue square pulls the red square down in weight. What about the little yellow square on the bottom right? We got another square. Okay, so here's a little bit of color theory that I actually didn't say in our color section. Did you guys know that yellow is the the color that your eye sees first all the time? This is why McDonald's golden arches are yellow, because they want to draw you in. That's why McDonald's will never stray away from the classic red and yellow. Exactly. So now look for yellow. Look for yellow in designs. Yes, yes, definitely. Colors have changed a little bit since, you know, the birth of the logo for McDonald's. But yeah, there are other strategies to draw your eye in. But probably the most simple one is to use yellow. And red is the second color that your eye sees first. So having both together is like bam, bam, you know. And you always look for those golden arches, right? Well, I don't anymore, but still. Okay, so our eye then, to answer that, our eye is also drawn down to the yellow and then is brought back around by those black lines in the composition. But let's look at it a little bit. Here's a black and white image of the same painting. See how the blue square is a little bit darker value than the red? Look on the image on the right. It's a little bit darker, right? So this is why our brain interprets the color blue as heavier than red, visually heavier than red because it's darker. Yes, exactly. Darker things kind of sink toward the bottom, lighter things kind of rise toward the top, or they come toward us color-wise. They kind of come toward the viewer sometimes. I mean, it all depends. It depends on the painting itself. Yes. So artists and designers often convert their images to black and white to check for balance this way. I always do that. I love my phone because I could take a picture of my painting, change it to a black and white filter, and then I can say, oh, I need more darks on this area, or I don't have enough light values or whatever. So color actually truly does have visual weight and impact that way. Do another. This is a poster design by Hans Allemann. Again, from the outside in, if we evaluate it that way, we have a mostly vertical design, tall, and it has mostly horizontal and vertical elements inside. The composition is horizontally divided near the middle. What divides it? Yep, that big word, motion, text. The group of text divides it down the middle, kind of, and it is asymmetrical in design on both axes. Do you guys agree? Yes. Okay. Don't shake your head no. Just kidding. All right, let's keep going. So what jumps out to your eye? What's the first thing you see? Yep, that little red dot in the right corner. I bet you if you're sitting in the front row right now, or like if you're on the computer, the red dot was the first thing you saw. But if you're in the back row, it's probably that word motion, right? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The red dot's really tiny, but it does jump out. If you guys want to walk up and see, you can. Yep, so that little red dot on the right side adds visual gravity and visual interest to the top right of the poster, but what brings us back down? Yeah, the thick motion, the thick word, the really bold type. Anything else that brings us back down or further downward? Yeah, I think so too. You can really see it in the black and white version on the right side, but there are these blue horizontal lines kind of in the bottom left quadrant, and they really also bring visual weight to this poster design. They also ground the text that's floating above it, because since those words are kind of blurry and they imply motion and movement and things, those really crisp blue horizontal lines act as like a static, more clear, stable thing that holds everything together. So there's, yeah, yes, exactly. Oh, good point, good point. So on the right edge of those three vertical lines, or sorry, the three horizontal lines on the bottom, there's a yellow word, exposed, and it's thin, but it goes all the way up to the top. It like literally is cropped off the page. It falls off the page. Yeah, so this particular design is successful in that it makes our eye move through it a lot. And then of course that, yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that. So what about that blank space in the top left? Is it important? Is it needed? Why is it needed? Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's a moment of rest. So in graphic design, this is called white space or negative space. I know it's not white, but it's like a blue gradient here. But designs need space to breathe. Yes, it gives our eye rest because the artist and the designer is asking us to literally engage with this drawing by reading it, or the poster, sorry, by reading it. So giving our eye a moment of rest helps us to appreciate the design, the designed qualities and the solutions in it. Okay. Yes. So there's a lot going on in this poster. The design is asymmetrical. Do you think it works? Some nods in the room. Yes. I think it works too. It does. Now the issue is we're not familiar with the actual prompt. These were a poster designed for like a lecture series or something, and so maybe the lecture series really touched on motion or interaction exposed, which is what it says. But maybe there were some like guidelines, like which colors can you use and not use, and which typefaces could you use and not use. So in our more modern world, if we were to design a lecture series for Lone Star College, maybe they wouldn't be blue, green, yellow like this. They'd be red, blue, white, or something. Just you remember there are rules that graphic designers have to follow by the client and stuff. So anyway, branding, super fun. You made it, folks. You made it. Does anyone have any questions before we start talking about your next sketchbook assignment? Okay. Okay. All right. In-person folks, stick around for just a second. We're going to take a break after I introduce this project to y'all, and then we'll start working on it in class. But for the next sketchbook project, online people, I think this is sketchbook project number 4 for you. Sketchbook assignment SB4, I believe. If not, it'll be announced on D2L. Not to worry. But for this sketchbook project, I would like you to choose one of your designs from project 3, which is those perspective boxes with the single color. Remember? You just finished it? Okay. Okay, the example that I gave from my old project is on the screen, if it jogs your memory. So this would be the one that I would choose to reevaluate. What you're going to do is on a new piece of paper, you're going to sketch and copy your design onto a new page. Yes, color and all, use the same color, but it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a sketch, remember? You're going to sketch 2 variations of this single design that you've chosen. So the good thing is you don't have to create anything new. You're just going to, literally copy something that you already made that you think is successful, and we're going to skew it a little bit. So the first variation should make your design appear symmetrical. So for this particular design on the screen, what I would probably do is take some of the black shading out of a couple of the triangles on the top, and then add more or fill in more on the bottom. And that would make it not visually symmetrical as in mirrored, but like balanced a little bit more. But you can do either one. You can copy like half of the sketch onto one side of a new square and then literally mirror the image. It's really up to you, but use a straight edge. It'll help you. Okay, so that's variation 1. Variation 1, make your design appear symmetrical. Variation 2 should make your design appear radially balanced. So remember, radial balance is like a wheel. It has all these different axes of symmetry, and you're going to attempt to achieve that just by skewing your design. So you don't have to remake it wholly, you just have to skew it a little bit. So just adjust your current design. Don't freak out. This is just a sketchbook assignment, you guys. So this could mean that you add texture into an area, or you could, erase some. You can fill in different areas. You can increase or decrease the sizes of objects or the line weights. There's so many different ways that you could skew your design to be more radially symmetrical or balanced or something. So I'm not looking for perfection. It's just exploration. But these last couple of projects and sketchbook assignments are a little bit more open-ended to make you use the design principles and solutions that you've already been taught. Does that make sense? Okay, let's talk about requirements. Yes, you have to copy your previous design from project 3 onto a new page, and you have to make 2 new squares with color and black and white, with a straight edge preferably, and make sure that those sketches are 3 by 3 inches. So follow the same template that you always use, 3 by 3 squares, or you can make them larger. You guys have questions? Do you have a question? Okay, yeah, I don't mind. Sketch as many variations as you want. You can turn in the best ones or whatever. And you can change colors, good point.